Good morning, it's the 3rd of January 2020, the start of a new decade. We all have plans for every decade. As I'm getting older, I have to reduce the plans, but never mind. Each one's worked out for me up to now. What I would like to do for the coming decade is get as many youngsters into gardening as possible. We know the state of the planet at the moment. I'm not going to go on and on about the state of the planet, but I will mention it, as and when. Being a gardener, we're in the best positions to help save the planet, and things that we do, which I will mention as we go through some videos. This morning I'd just like to bring out something that we can be doing at the present moment, and obviously it all depends upon the facilities that everyone has as to whether they can get into their gardens and work this time of the year. I'm fortunate. I've been gardening for a lot of years, and I've owned the plot of land that I'm on here for 45 years. And over the years we've built up quite a good facility around us, which you'll see as the videos go through. Over the last couple of days, you can see I've been incorporating well-rotted poultry manure into the garden. First of all, people get on to me about which manure is the best, and how do we use manure. Well, firstly, let's understand manure isn't going to feed your garden. We still need to look at other ways of actually feeding the garden and looking after the soil. But what we add manure for, I don't add it every year, but what I do add it for, it's basically to keep the soil in good condition, keep the humus in the soil, and keep the microbiology within the soil. I don't use manure if there's no worms in it. I like to see it well rotted before I actually start using it and make sure there's plenty of worms in. The worms are in this manure. It is 2 to 3 year old hen manure. I used to breed a lot of rare breed poultry, and this is I had a heart attack 2 years ago, and this is since then I haven't had so many poultry. So this heap that we're digging into now is at least 2 year old, but some of it's maybe 3 year old. It's full of worms, and it will help the biology of the soil. Feed wise, different people say different things. We hear a lot of fertilizer being produced from poultry manure, and yet it's actually one of the weaker ones. But forget about the fertility content within the manure. Basically, it's the same as good garden compost. If you compost properly, what you're doing is you're adding humus to your soil, and you're keeping your soil in good condition. We all have different types of soil, and it's some people who are actually possibly new to gardening. Obviously, you can only grow in what soil you have, but understanding soil is quite important. For vegetable growing, I would suggest if you can get heavy clay-based soil, which breaks down when you actually work it, let the frost get into it, dig it over in the autumn, leave it rough dug in the autumn. I would suggest every few years that you do have it analysed, just to let you know what fertility levels are in the soil. Add manure. I wouldn't add compost on a regular basis. Compost as in bags of compost. Yes, compost that you've composted from your garden waste and kitchen waste, that's always good to add into the soil. As for feeds from the manure, I would basically disregard that. Once you've had your soil analysed, you can assess what fertiliser you need. Different types of fertiliser. First of all, you've got organics, fish blood and bone meal, dried blood, hoof and horn. These are all organic fertilisers, all come mainly from animals. Other fertilisers which you can use, comfrey rotted down. If you grow comfrey, put it into a barrel of water. It only takes a couple of weeks to rot down. There are several ways that you can make your own fertiliser. If you add organic compost, you must realise that it has to be broken down before it's made available for your plants to feed from, and microorganisms within the soil, they do the breaking down for you. So it's important that you look after your soil and build up a good microorganism base, plenty of worms in there. A lot of people say to me, what do you feed plants on? I try not to feed if possible. I try to look after the soil, make sure the soil is correct for them. Obviously, if you've got plants in containers, they will need to be fed, and we'll discuss that as the season goes on. My clear view is take a look across the fields, look at the biggest thing that are grown in the country, which are the trees that we've got in our countryside. There's nobody going around feeding the trees. Basically, the ecology of the earth does it. They drop the leaves rot, the microorganisms in the soil pull the leaf down the soil, break it down, produces fertilizer which feeds the trees to grow as big as they do. So, you know, tend not to get carried away with fertilizer and feeding, but I will mention different fertilizers as we actually go through the season. It depends on the crop we're growing. Other types of fertilizer, we can look at chemical fertilizers. I used to use chemical fertilizers because they're much more quick acting than organics are, and obviously more potent, and you know exactly what you're giving the plants when you give them chemical fertilizer. The only trouble is chemicals do have a residue. You'll get a salt build-up in your beds, and also it's not good for the biology of the soil. So now I tend not to use chemical fertilizer. This is more or less an introduction this morning. There are several jobs that we can be doing at this time of the year depending on facilities. Possibly later in the week, or maybe it's at the weekend, I will do another little clip of the greenhouse at this present moment, show some of the facilities which I have. We're in one of the polytunnels at the moment, as we can see. That's stock plants, stock leeks that you see on the far side. Looking through the other side, full circle, this is a multi-span house, goes right through. There are still plants in other sections of the tunnel which have been grown this year and need cleaned out. It isn't a tidy garden at all times. We all get into a mess at certain times of the year. We do our utmost to keep on top of it. Cleanliness is what you need in a garden. Any disease or any pest will be harboured in dirty gardens. So clean the leaves up, compost them regular, try and keep the place weed free, and clear old plants and stock out. Sterilising, I tend not to sterilise the soil unless I have a major problem, but I haven't sterilised for years and years now. Keep your soil in good health. Some of the organic things that I do use I will show you once we're up in the greenhouse. I'll show you some of the things which I use to try and keep on top of pest and disease. That's 5 minutes for this morning, chaps. Thank you very much for joining me, and I'll try and do, you know, 1 or 2 clips a week until we get, maybe it's too busy, but I will, you know, continue to try and post as much as we can about a varied selection of subjects. Thanks very much now. Bye bye.